Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Kim Storin, who's the CMO over at Zayo Group. Kim and I've known each other for a long time. I don't know when we met. It was
probably too long.
Yes.
Too long to admit. We're not that old yet.
We're both Austin marketers who have been in the tech space for a while. So I'm so glad to have her. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thanks, Kelly. It's good to see you, although virtually this time.
Yeah.
Nice to see you in person.
That's right. Yeah, it's nice to be local. A little bit about Kim. Kim Storin has 20 plus years experience in enterprise tech. She's been doing M&A integration with companies from Fortune 50 all the way to growth startups. She is kind of a turnaround transformation expert, fierce optimist. She's worked across companies to re-architect brand strategies and create new categories, design organizations from the ground up, build operational strategies and models that enable businesses to grow and hit synergy and alignment. So we're so excited to have her here to talk about a lot of these things, some of the do's and don'ts during mergers and acquisitions, ways to face change with resiliency and optimism and all the things that go with that. Does that sound like a good place to start?
I love it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, so before we start, tell me a little bit about you, or tell the audience a little bit about your background, where you came from, how you got here, and then we'll build from there.
Yeah. So I kind of came through marketing in an untraditional path. I started my career in crisis communications, and then after business school, actually focused on mergers and acquisitions at Deloitte, doing management consulting. And ultimately decided that I wanted to go in-house, wanted to get out of the, Sunday through Thursday, getting on a plane grind of consulting. And I loved it. I learned a ton, but knew that I was ready to move into the B2B space and started in Dell. So enterprise technology and working on, at the time, Dell was primarily a consumer focused business. And we went through 6 acquisitions, really focused on building it into an enterprise B2B powerhouse. And so that was really my first time doing transformation and mergers and acquisitions in an organization versus from a consulting standpoint. And I really felt that ultimately that was the place I was able to have a bigger impact. And so I've stayed in B2B for the rest of my career to date and learned a ton and been really focused on businesses that are undergoing a significant turnaround or transformation. I did a little bit of a stint in a growth startup. To be honest, it was not my jam. I realize I am a transformation person at heart, and there are people who love hypergrowth, and that's the place where they really find that they can add a lot of value. I felt that my expertise, my crisis communications, my background in M&A for Fortune 50 companies really lent me more into a transformation space than necessarily a hypergrowth. And so it's been great. And it's kind of been one of the things that I've found that's been a highlight of my career is that I've always raised my hand when someone says, eat the frog, I eat the frog. And I feel like transformation is really that place, right? Because it's not as sexy as that hypergrowth kind of Series A, Series B, Series C energy, but it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of strategy. And you've got a lot of cost constraints and guardrails that you've got to work within. And I find that my background really lends itself well to that. So that's where I've spent the majority of my career.
I love that. I mean, there's so many parts in that resonate. I too am not a startup CMO. I did my stint, which I think you have to. I think you have to have done it to realize. Mm-hmm. And I loved it while I was there, and I learned a ton, and it's made me a better leader. But it's also made me very self-aware of the fact that is my jam. Like, I don't necessarily need the big, huge, massive enterprise one where I'm kind of disconnected from the action and kind of marketing by PowerPoint. But I do need a little bit more, a little further along, a little bit more stable resources,
absolutely,
a story to impact versus just push the gas. So I think
exactly.
That's a really great one.
Fake it till you make it is not where I like to live.
That's right. There is something else you said, which I think it sounds like it was earlier in your career, so it may not be as relevant now, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. You were a consultant first, especially with the Deloitte days, before moving into more of the operator type function at Dell. And since then, we have a lot of folks I talk to all the time who are like, should I consider the sort of fractional thing or the consulting thing? Now, especially in our careers, we sort of move into this stage, or should I stay in an operator role? Like from your experience, like from doing both, which one, like what's the major differences and kind of that ownership, reputation, passion, buy-in?
I think management consulting is different than fractional. And so I want to be cautious in keeping them separate, but I have thoughts on both. But I think, ultimately what is great about consulting, especially early in your career, is that you are forced to learn fast about industries that you'll never really have the opportunity to learn about in most normal situations. And so I think about the fact, I worked for a coal mining company that did a merger of equals. It actually existed. Everyone says merger of equals doesn't exist. I did one. I worked for a retirement that, which was really a real estate company, but all these Brookdale retirement homes. We did 3 acquisitions at once to build that organization. And you just have to learn quickly about, either deep technology or these industries that you would just never imagine. I had to learn about coal mining over a weekend at my brother's wedding because I had to pitch the deal on Tuesday after a long wedding weekend. And so you just have to get deep in places. And I found that has really suited my marketing leadership and executive skills. So the fact that I can understand really complex technology and be able to put on my product marketing hat at any moment to be able to dig in from the customer point of view and think about those pain points and understand the marketecture, not just the marketing, right? And so I think I honed those skills as a consultant, and having to get deep fast and know enough to be dangerous quickly, that has really enabled me to be able to take on anything from an enterprise B2B standpoint. I think maybe in consumer, it's not as difficult to understand the technology and how the stack all fits together and the ecosystem and the players. But in B2B, that consulting background has really served me well. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that management consulting taught me early in my career that I never really realized would help me now is flexibility. So kind of being able to work anywhere at any time, sitting on the floor of an airport or, on vacation because, you've gotten stuck somewhere and you have to get creative. All of those skills, like post-pandemic, really served me well, because I think this work from anywhere mindset has been really challenging for people. But for me, it's been my way of life since, early on. Yeah. And so it was really easy for me to transition into this. And I think that really ended up helping me in a way that I could have never expected back then, of being able to really be able to focus and work wherever I need to at that given point. But I do think fractional is interesting, because I think a lot of people are starting to think about fractional now as we get into, let's call it phase 3 of our careers, right? We get to the point where we've had, career 1.0. Yep. Then we get into like leadership, which is career 2.0. And now we're thinking about, what does 3.0 look like, right? Am I going to be a CMO for the next 20 plus years? And I think fractional becomes a question that a lot of CMOs start to ask themselves. Yeah. And, I think, ultimately, if you are at a point where you're looking to be able to dial down and focus on some other aspects of your career, I think it's a great option. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily think it's an option for everyone. And as I look at this market right now, and the little case, the lowercase or the uppercase R recession that we are sitting in right now, with a lot of mixed messages coming from the market. It's like one day you can have the best stock market day in a long time, and then the next day you look around, you read the Austin Business Journal and everybody's getting laid off. That I think in that kind of tumultuous world that we're living in right now, that making a step to fractional feels risky at this point in a way that it might not have a couple of years back, and it might not a couple of years from now.
Yeah.
But I think, ultimately, if I were looking to go down that path, I would probably wait until the market stabilizes a little bit more, because I think there's still a lot of questions right now on where does marketing's value lie? And I want to be part of those conversations as an operator, not part of those conversations as a fractional.
Yeah.
At this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the market is crazy right now. And I hear mixed signals too about when this, big R recession, to use your language, becomes a little R recession, or when we come out of it. I've heard everything from late 24 to like early 27. So who really knows where the market's going, right? But I think you're right. One fun fact on that, my son and I are in an organization called Young Men's Service League, and we do like mother-son volunteer stuff all throughout the year. Anyway, and one of our frequents is Brookdale. And so we like to play, we go play bingo with the folks over at Brookdale on a fairly regular basis. And we do,
I love that,
sidewalk chalk outside. They like having like hearts and rainbows and stuff on the sidewalks outside of their doors and stuff. So anyway, we spend a lot of time over at the Brookdale. So that's fun that you to early in your career.
Oh yes. Coal mining, retirement homes.
I know. It all the same, right? All the way
networking. I did 2 chocolate deals. So I worked at Nestle for a while doing a couple of acquisitions, although one was pizza. So it wasn't all chocolate. But then I worked at Godiva. I did the spinoff of Godiva from Campbell's Soup.
Yeah.
And so I was like the queen of chocolate for a while. Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, there you go. And there's some overlap there that, I come from consumer goods, and we acquired pizza while I was there. I think we acquired the DiGiorno brand, and a lot of things we were doing while I was at Kraft. So those are fun days, and that's all been divested since.
Yeah.
Fun time in that business. So, okay. So the theme I hear in all of this, you think about even talking about from consultant to an M&A to B2B operator, startup, enterprise, kind of all the things. The theme on all that is there's a lot of change. You're coming into companies, specifically as you think about yourself as a transformational CMO, like you're signing up for the change. That's what you're coming in for. And so that's a big part. Transformation is a big part of companies. It's a big part of moving the needle forward, propelling growth, cutting off baggage. Like it does a lot of things to kind of clean up. But a lot of times, one, there's a few learnings I'd love to hear about what your transformation experiences have been, but also like how do bringing people along through that change, I think, is a big part of that. Like the sort of resiliency needed by the people that are a part of that. Not everybody has the same appetite for change. So tell me about some of your experiences or what you've learned along the way there.
Yeah. So I think there's a great quote by John Maxwell that says change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's really the mantra and the motto that powers me through change, because I think ultimately my biggest career growth opportunities have happened because of change. And so I see change as ultimately an opportunity for a company, right? If you look at the corporate lens, like the ability to pivot and change. And if you can't move with the winds of the market, and you can't move by listening to feedback from your customers and your partners, then you don't want to be stacked. So change is good in that sense. And I think a lot of times we have this mindset that change is bad, but in reality, change is good because it's a pivot. It's an opportunity for an organization or for humans within that organization to grow and move in a different direction that might be better positioned for the future than the current one. And so I think we have to start with that optimism of around what change is at the heart of it. And then ultimately, what it comes down to is how do you manage that change? And you do have to, not everyone has that mentality, right? That it's an opportunity. So how do you start to bring the organization along with you? And I do think that, marketing more and more has the opportunity to be the change advocacy within an organization. And I think it starts because we have to broaden our view of what brand means, right? We always think about brand as customer brand, but in reality, it's also partner brand. It's also employer brand. And if we broaden that overall view of what brand is, then we can naturally play a role in managing that change for our organization and not just our team, right? Because I think there's always a role that we play in helping our teams come along, but how do we take that broader charter for the organization overall? And so expanding our lens to what brand is, I think, is the first step. I think the other thing, and I've been seeing this a lot. I think it was Spencer Stuart that shared some of this data in their most recent CMO report. But while the CMO role, you see a lot of misinformation out right now in terms of people getting rid of the CMO role and what does that mean? And in a lot of cases, it's the CMO role is really expanding and growing. And one of the places where you see it expanding is into communications. And so I think, again, as you look at this opportunity to be the change advocate, if you are a CMO that owns communications, right? I own communications. Part of that is because of my background starting in communications, but I also think it's really important from a brand standpoint to find that alignment. But that also gives you, more of that platform to be the change advocate within your organization. And so as you think about how do you do that within the company and for the company, you have to start asking those questions that are beyond just your small ecosystem of your team, right? Because now it becomes even more important that you understand the pain of all of the frontline employees, that you understand the pain that all those middle managers are going through and that all those senior leaders are going through. And how do you bring them along on that journey and paint a picture of where the strategy is leading? So for example, right now at Zayo, I am co-leading our 5-year strategy refresh with our chief product and strategy officer. And so that really provides an opportunity for marketing to play a really key role in being able to be the voice of and the voice to the market in a very strategic and corporate, all-encompassing corporate manner. You and I know each other from AMD, and I had the opportunity to play that same role, partnering with corporate strategy at the time to roll out, our entire strategy refresh, which included a brand refresh. Yep. And so I think the more that we as marketing leaders can think about that brand in a wider lens and start partnering with strategy or product or whoever is really corporately assigned that strategy function, then we can really drive more of a lens of being that voice of and to the market, but also being the voice of and to our employees and bringing them along on that pivot.
Yeah.
So you've got to really paint that picture and take it into bite-sized chunks for them to help them understand what each piece means. So for Zayo's transformation, we've built out 7 key moves, which defines our strategy refresh. And so with our employees, I'm breaking down each and every one of those 7 moves and helping them understand the what's in it for me. Yep. And what they can see in the market as a result of those 7 moves and ultimately where the company will go as a result of those 7 moves. And, just being able to take it from high level into what's in it for me is really important in change.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's great. We're going through something very similar. It's why if you probably saw me taking notes during, because I think there's some big elements on that. We're also in the middle of a brand refresh and kind of this business transformation kind of mindset. And we've been and as part of the brand, you never want to be the CMO who shows up and does a brand because that's what new CMOs do. And brand refresh really has to be part of a larger pivot in the in the market, the pivot for a pivot for your culture, a pivot for all the things. Because to your point, I always tell the team, my view of AT&T is not the logo.
Right.
It's not the commercial I even saw on TV. It's probably the last service rep who came to my house to fix my internet.
Yep.
Probably the uptime on my phone and how fast my phone connects. So it's about product, it's about service, it's about the employee like mindset, it's about their attitude when they come to my house, it's about their level of service, and it happens to be about the messaging and the logo. So it's so much more a marketing thing. It is a company where I like to think of us as business athletes here every day instead of marketing leaders, right?
Exactly.
So I love that. I think that's great. One of the things that that you've mentioned before about driving some of that change is aligned around optimism and curiosity. I'd love to hear kind of like, what do these qualities mean to you? How do those show up on something like this when a company's in the middle of a transformation?
Yes, I think there's 3 capabilities that every leader needs if you want to lead during, maybe it's if you want to lead generally speaking, but I think if you want to lead in a transformation, right, there's 3 things. The first is curiosity. So are you always interested in where the market is heading, where the customers are going, what's next? So having that sense of curiosity of like, what's coming next in the market. I think the second piece is agility. And I say agility, not meaning like agile marketing with a capital A, but more agility with a lowercase a, the ability to look back and say, what hasn't been working or what has been working? What do we need to double down on? What do we need to scale? What do we need to kill now? So having that ability to like look back and pivot if needed, or to double down if needed. And then the third one is the ability to take calculated risk. And the word calculated is really calculated in that sense, because, in transformation, you typically don't have, the fake it till you make it money that you might see in a hyper growth startup environment. And so being able to look across where you're making your investments and understand how to make calculated decisions and take calculated risks that, again, you can look at quickly and either double down or kill pretty fast so that you can get a sense of where that return on investment is happening. But I think it's those 3 capabilities ultimately that enable leaders to not just survive transformation, but really thrive in transformation. And so to me, curiosity, especially in B2B and especially in what we're seeing now when it comes to AI, is so critical. And it comes not just from our curiosity at work and in a professional environment, but also our curiosity outside of work. Yeah. And how are we embracing, new technologies in our life in general? And where do we start to feel comfortable? I mean, obviously you and I have been involved with, semiconductors. We were involved in AI and mining and all these things before it was even, cool. I mean, and shoot, 1954 was the first Dartmouth conference, right? So AI has been there for ages. I launched a server at IBM that was a GPU accelerated server, launched it with NVIDIA, and really got to know a lot of data scientists that were working on, DL and ML. I never once thought at that point, even though I knew all the marketing use cases and I knew these really smart data scientists and infrastructure folks, I never expected me as a CMO to be using AI day to day. Right. And this is, 2015 when I launched the server. And then now today, it is AI everywhere, right? Fingers on a keyboard. Our kids are using AI on a day-to-day basis. We're using AI, whether it's, I use AI sometimes to write fake legal letters or change you're a lawyer. We use it all the time. I used it to plan a vacation last year. And I think that curiosity that I have in my personal life really translates to the curiosity that I'm able to bring to my team, encourage my team to test tools, to really test the market, to have those conversations that might be a little uncomfortable with customers, to figure out where they're heading and what are they playing around with. And so I think we've got to be comfortable in all aspects of our life to be curious, to test things out, and to not be afraid of failing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's awesome. I love the curiosity angle. We talk about that a lot, even at Demandbase, because account-based marketing is complex. The tool is powerful. It's super powerful, but it's also complex. And so we really and we're sort of a open box on get in here and figure out why. And so we talk a lot about, hey, customers, dive in, like dig into this data, understand where this intent is coming from, understand the exact signals that are driving this. Like, we welcome curious people because we want people who are in there, and I want my team to feel empowered because we are marketers selling to marketers. So we often are customer zero. We often meet with customers about how we're using, because we run Demandbase on Demandbase. How are we using it? And it's because I think my team has dug so much into the details of how the thing works that they're able to help empower customers on how to do the same. And that curiosity realizes, like, man, there's so much potential here that I didn't even see. And your point, like playing around with AI in every part of your personal life and professional life. I mean, even whether it's ChatGPT or it's using, automated, prescriptive sales dashboards to tell sellers what to do every day. Like, we're using AI in every part of how we're operating. So I think that's fantastic. Cool. We're going to switch gears again a little bit. So part of the, I think adopting new technologies, having this focus on transformation, this focus on moving the business forward, means that you need to be, especially as a CMO, aligned cross-functionally with your peers. So sales is a big part of that. Obviously, product can be, finance can be, CS can be. We have all these. Sales is probably the most day-to-day, immediate. But I'd love to hear how you kind of think about alignment. How do you foster collaboration with your sales counterparts? How do you build that relationship? How do you make sure you're all marching in the same direction? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first part of it is getting past this, sales is from Saturn, marketing is from Mars mentality, right? We're all in it together to win, and it's not a zero-sum game. And I think we have to continue to drive that mentality at the highest level of the organization, that ultimately marketing will never and can never be green when the rest of the business is red, right? We are all driving to the same outcomes. And, when we get trapped in that death spiral of MQL to SQL, we often get into that finger pointing. Well, your leads are crappy. Well, you're not calling my leads. And it's like this, cross communication that just ends in always a bad situation regardless. So I think it starts by stepping back and saying, how do we align our metrics across the organization, across the go-to-market functions in a way that is not, you win or I lose? And so that's kind of the first step, is, do we have those core metrics that we all agree on? And then how do we build a go-to-market? We at Zayo, we don't have a go-to-market leader per se, right? We don't have someone who is a program manager, for example, that is on point for managing all the go-to-market activities, right? It is a collective and coordinated approach among product, commercial operations, sales, and marketing. And so it means that every day we have to come to the table as a collaborative leadership team. So what I started doing is so my product and vertical marketing leader dotted lines into our product organization. And so she sits, she is part of my leadership team. She's part of my staff meetings, but then she also sits on our chief product and strategy officer's staff meetings as well, to really foster that cross collaboration. She also sits, because I have product and vertical marketing owned by the same leader very intentionally, that she also sits on the staff meeting of our CSO. And so that collaboration model is just inherently built in because of how, like, our vertical marketing and our product marketing is supported by the same marketing leader, which really enables that really clear ownership across the board, and also that really clear partnership across the board. So yes, like, I sit with my cross-functional leaders on a weekly basis, and I'm going through that go-to-market, priorities and where are we putting our efforts collectively together. But at the working level, she's also doing that as well, which I think is really important, because sometimes it feels like the leaders are aligned, but the working teams aren't. So, sometimes we talk about the fact that there's a lot of staff meetings that she's got to be part of, but those staff meetings are so critical, and that connective tissue, that there's a lot of inherent value there. But by building that collaboration model, not just at the leadership team, but also at the working team, has been really, really helpful, because there is so much effort we have right now around, managing that go-to-market experience across product, commercial operations, sales, and marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important. I think you hit on some of the key things: metrics, people, process, like meetings, and making sure that you're all kind of there. I think you've also talked about, or so it's passionate to me, and I'm sure it's you as well, is the empathy that's required, kind of understanding what sales is struggling with every day, what product is struggling with every day, maybe what our customer teams are struggling with. How does that impact the way that you think about like managing those relationships, not just from a roles and responsibilities and a process perspective, but actually from how we lead kind of as humans?
Yeah, I think it's so important. So we have a saying in the marketing manifesto that we built for our team, which is assume positive intent.
Yeah.
And, there's moments, and I mean, we're all human. There are moments where you think to yourself, this person is out to get marketing, right? Why are they bypassing all the processes that we've agreed to? Why are they going around? And when you kind of step back and assume positive intent, you realize the pressure that they're under, the pressure that they're under with their P&L, the pressure that they're under with our board. And we're not always privy to the elements of pressure that they feel. And sometimes it's just somebody had a really crappy day and wasn't thinking straight. And so I think assuming positive intent really always enables us to start from, a positive perspective and ensure that we have that empathy and that we're thinking, like, we're understanding where they're coming from before we make assumptions. But what I find that's really important along with that empathy is the ability to, number one, call people out, right? To be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm going to assume positive intent here, but this is not great behavior. Can we have a conversation around this? And just as much as you assume positive intent, you also have to be transparent in that communication with those other leaders in order to really make sure that we get back to the right place. I think the other thing that is really important in addition to like thinking about that positive intent is having documented roles and responsibilities. And so having your RACI model so that you're not going to always follow that RACI model for a million different reasons.
Yeah.
But if you've got that documented and everyone's agreed to that documentation in spirit and with positive intent, then it's easy to have empathy, to have positive intent, but also to go back and get back to the core and the spirit of what you're trying to accomplish together. And ensure that, like, hey, I understand that, X, Y, and Z might have happened and you had to go around this, but like, let's get back to the core of this. Are we all still aligned? And having that documented model really ensures that it just takes the emotion out of the conversation in a way that can't be taken out otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really smart, because then you don't kind of have, is that my job? Is that your job? I think you own that. Do I own that? Like, having that clarity on RACI, I think, makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And the assume positive intent, I think, is so right. I think that comes, I sort of can say that on paper. What I've learned over my years is it takes an investment in getting to know people as full humans, not as their job title, but as like, when I think of, we talk about the marketing and sales alignment. That's one thing that feels this sort of nebulous thing of like a group of sellers, when it's like my relationship with John the seller, like, and it's, John the human, who I know has good intent, who I know is working his butt off, who I know is working every single thing coming through. It's a different conversation. Like, man, I can assume good intent because I know the individual humans versus this like nebulous idea of sales or marketing or product. It makes a big difference.
Do you feel like the remote world that we live in has made it like we don't have a chance to break bread as often, right?
It does make relationships. Yeah, it does make them feel a little bit more two-dimensional, because somehow when you're on a scheduled Zoom call, you kind of feel the need to get in, get to business, get out, because you're not having the like, hanging out in the conference room, chatting while you're waiting for everybody to get there, or running into each other at lunch and starting the conversation before you walk into a meeting, or having lunch or dinner or whatever. So yeah, I think, and those parts, like the practical in me is often like, oh, I don't want to waste some money to like fly us together, because like, let's be efficient with our funds. Let's put the money towards go to market. Let's do whatever. And then you do it and you bring everybody together and you're like, man, what a gift. Like I have a different level of trust. I have a different level of understanding and empathy. I have a different level of, now when I hear them talk in a meeting, I can understand what's behind those words instead of just taking at face value of a two-dimensional screen. It's one of those things that I don't know that we need to go back to full face-to-face world full time, but investing in that time together in real life on a regular basis is a game changer, I think, like just from a spirit perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Well, cool. Well, I know we're running long here. I've loved this conversation, by the way. I think it's an angle that we haven't talked about before so much in this transformation, appetite for change, good intent, working across lines, elevating marketing as really like a part of the strategic conversation, not just the people driving pipeline or building logos or, making content. So I love all that. So thank you for sharing all that. One last question before we part. What is one thing, one fun fact, one, I don't know, exciting dot in your life that you'd love to share that people don't know about you?
Oh, well, I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about, so in the spirit of curiosity, last year I decided so I've been doing Pilates for 20 years. As you know, I'm a long distance runner. And so it's always been my counterbalance to like running a marathon is to make sure that I'm like doing my strength and flexibility work. And last year I decided to like just go get certified to teach Pilates. Wow. And it's a shit ton of work, I will tell you, like way more than I ever expected, right? I mean, it was, a 3-day anatomy class and I had to take like 3 full days and a lot of studying and anatomy learning. It totally got me out of, my brain in a different way. Let me learn something about the human body, anatomy that I just had never, like I kind of knew it from, running as long as I've been running and doing Pilates as long as I've been doing it, but like hadn't really taken the time to learn something in depth like that in a really long time. And it was a 9-month commitment essentially in terms of doing that work on the side. And I just found that I learned so much about myself. I really enjoyed getting back into a learning mode that was like legitimately, I mean, I've got anatomy books stacked up there that is not computer. And it was beautiful. Like I just loved this ability to like learn something in my old school, like 1990s way.
From a textbook, in real life, all the things.
Yeah. But it was such a great experience for me in terms of getting my brain and body to work in a different way. And it was something that I felt like I hadn't accomplished something in my adulthood that really, I mean, obviously we accomplish things with work every day and those things, but it was something that was just really different and got my brain working in a different way. And I'm really proud of it.
That's awesome. So 2 questions on that. So I lied when I said it was the last question. So one is, what are you going to do with it? Like, do you want to be, are you doing any teaching of Pilates, like on the side? Are you running a class or anything?
Yeah. So I teach Thursday nights. So I teach 2 classes on Thursday nights. And then I teach a couple of private classes as well. So it's not like a full-time gig. It'll never be a full-time gig, obviously. It has a long way to go to replace our CMO salaries. Yeah. But it's a really fun way to do something different, to really like stretch myself and
literally,
literally and figuratively, yeah. And to put the phone down, right? To put the computer down for a while. So I get to go and teach these classes on Thursday night, and there's no technology, and it's just interacting with people. It's teaching, and it's so it's really interesting. It's totally different. Yeah. And I never thought I would do it it was my midlife crisis. Some people get a Porsche.
Instructor. I love it.
I studied anatomy.
Yeah. So one question, super practical, because our listeners tend to be either existing CMOs or a future up and coming want to be CMOs. So people who have probably big jobs, who have like long hours and all the kind of things. Tell me how you exercise, like your calendaring of exercise. If you're running for a marathon, do you run in the mornings? Do you run afternoon? Do you take
I'm morning
breaks? You're a morning runner.
I'm morning.
Okay.
And the good news is that I didn't realize, but I chose wisely in working at a company that's an hour behind.
Oh.
So because Denver is where our company is based, and we've got people everywhere, but we kind of work on mountain time hours. And so that works really well with my exercise schedule.
Yeah.
And I'm able to, and also in Texas, you got to run in the morning.
Right.
Otherwise you're done. So, so it's really worked out well in terms of having that extra hour in the morning until other people are awake and functioning that I'm able to get it in. But I also think it just comes down to like owning your calendar.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we let everybody else own our calendars except ourselves, whether that's our kids, our partners, our parents, our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately it just comes down to us being able to block out that time and to say no appropriately in order to say yes for the right things. Right. Yeah. And I think, this world that we live in that is a little bit more asynchronous than it's ever been. And again, this kind of goes back to like, the skills I learned as a consultant, just to bring it back to the beginning of this conversation that I never expected to really, but I was running marathons at the same time that I was working an 80-hour week, that I was getting on a plane every Sunday night at 10 p.m. and getting home every Thursday night at midnight. And I was only able to do that because
you just made it
focus. It just made it a priority. And that skill set has really served me. So you just, you just have to do it and figure out how to make it work. And no one, when we're 90 years old and looking back, we're never going to say like, I wish I worked one more hour, but we might say like, I wish I ran that marathon, or I wish I did, I was at my kid's sports game, or I wish I was wherever. So we just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you said that I need to be better at controlling my calendar. I try, and I block big things to get all this stuff done. And then someone asks, and I'm like, oh, sure, I'll give away my little work block, exercise block. I do make my kids' sports a priority. Like I don't ever miss any of their stuff.
I love that. That's good.
That's my rule. I just need to make my own sports a priority as well. So that's the takeaway from that. Well, awesome. Well, Kim, it has been such a pleasure having you, and so good to connect. I'm sure next time we'll connect face to face, but I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was good to see you.
Awesome. You too. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Bye, everybody.